Hello and welcome to another episode of Come Back Stronger, where we bring you stories from all over the world of people who have faced adversity, overcome that adversity, and have come back stronger. I'm Jimmy Fasig, and I'm here with my law partner Dana Brooks.
Hello.
And we are super excited to bring to you today and introduce you Tony Jones. Tony Jones.
Yes.
He was incarcerated. He had a double life sentence for a very minor drug offense, and then fought to get himself out, ultimately got out, and now he's out helping people achieve clemency and doing a lot of other good things for the world. So we can't wait to introduce you to Tony Jones. Dana, what do you think about Tony?
I like Tony because anybody else in that situation would probably just go, I cannot believe this. I mean, you can't get your head around it because it was a relatively minor drug offense, but given the sentencing guidelines that were mandatory, we'll get into how that all works and what prosecutors decide to charge and that sort of thing. But if you get convicted under a certain prosecutorial scheme, the judge's hands are tied, and they had to enter these sentencing guidelines that were just ridiculous. They were just not a measured response to the infraction at all, and it's life-ruining for so many people. And he was one of those people who was looking at 2 life terms if he had to go to jail and serve his time. And this was in the mid-late 90s, 1990s, and I think he didn't get out until 2016. But he's going to talk. He's going to tell us about his journey along the way and what he learned and what he's doing to help other people who find themselves in that mess right now. But under the leadership of President Obama, this Clemency Started program started, and he was able to kind of master that and help some other people navigate that system.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to go to a commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to introduce you to Tony Jones.
So I think one of the important roles that a female lawyer has is understanding the family dynamic. The more you understand what people do for their families, the more money you can get people when they're injured and they can't service their families by everything that they're doing at home and at work. Right. And I don't want to say that men don't understand that family dynamic, but I do think that statistics show that women understand that family dynamic more and can empathize and sympathize with it because of our own roles in our own homes.
Right, and it helps offset some of these assumptions about women's claims, which is that they're inherently valued lower, it's easier to replace the things that they do, they're more menial, they're not higher earning career professionals. When you look at everything they do, and what the negligence of the wrongdoer has cost them and this whole entire family, that adds up pretty fast. And you've got to have somebody who is looking out for you and knows to go after every single thing you are owed.
Welcome back to Come Back Stronger, where we're introducing you to Mr. Tony Jones, who was sentenced to 2 life sentences for a minor drug offense and was able to fight for his rights and ultimately got clemency, and now he's helping other people out. Stay tuned and introduce you to Tony Jones.
Tony Jones, author, activist, I want to thank you so very much for being with us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you went to prison, and you were sentenced to 2 death sentences for a non-violent drug offense. I want to tell me a little bit about your background and how that came to be.
Yeah, so at the age of 23 years old, I was arrested by the federal government, and I was charged with drug conspiracy and distribution charges. At the time, my lawyer was telling me that the charges carried 10 years to life. So I never had an indication that I would get a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. And throughout that court proceeding, my lawyer kept saying, "Oh, I got this, I got this, and he didn't have this, And I remember at sentencing, the judge said, "Mr. Jones is getting a life sentence today," and that there brought everything. Like what? And when I got 2 life sentences, there was no drugs, no drugs at the case, just testimony from convicted felons and those people looking for time cuts.
So it was other people basically turning evidence against you. They didn't have anything hard on you, but you had all these other people. That's amazing. And this is what, back in
1997.
1997. So this was back still doing the quote unquote war on drugs and all the conspiracy, or not conspiracy, but stuff over federal sentencing guidelines and all that. So, I mean, I imagine that had to have been a shock for someone like you, I mean, getting sentenced to life in prison on the words of other people?
It was so like devastating because I told myself, I said, if this was legit, they can lock the whole world up because there was no controlled buys, no drug bust, no nothing. And I was saying to myself, prior before getting sentenced and prior while going to trial, I was like, there's no way in the world jury can convict me for testimony. There's no way in the world. But at the same time, they knew what they was doing. And next thing you know, it happened. It's like my life did not matter. They didn't care about me or the people that came before me. It was just like life sentence.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's a harsh reality, but do you think your race entered into that decision at all?
Oh, of course, of course. When I was learning and reading, I read so much stuff. I read, it was some work called some work. It was talked about the master's house, and the master's house consists of white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism. And they say this is what the prison systems consist of. It's about selling judgments, making money off of people's ignorance, and just and my skin color. Just locking them up. We're gonna benefit from them.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that most prisons and jails actually are for profit. You're basically charged at X amount of dollars per day for being in there, and whether you're paying it or the state's paying it or the government's paying it, but they profit from having people like you locked up for a long time.
I remember reading one time it was saying that the prison system, they make not billions of dollars but trillions of dollars because these judgments that they have off of, they make money because they are actually debt, and they sell them. They sell these judgments on Wall Street. And I done a lot of research. A lot of retail stores, big stores buy these judgments, and that's how they stay from bankrupt. They can get more inventory, and they continue to prosper on the backs of our blood, sweat, and tears from people that's incarcerated.
I want to take you back to before the sentencing. Tell me a little bit about your childhood, grow up, your education, and kind of your life up to the point where you got convicted.
Okay, so I grew up in a middle class neighborhood. My dad was in the military, was in the Navy, and my mother was a nurse. And at the time, I was a young person, just looking around, just looking at things, and I just got caught up just doing things in the street, selling drugs in the street, in the streets. And I graduated from high school, and I just continued to do things I didn't want to do. But my whole time is my parents was always pushing me to go in the military. But at that time, I took the test, didn't pass it, and it's kind of crazy because today I can pass any test with ease. But it was just I went to the prison system, and I went to trial, from that point, and got all that time. I like I said, we grew up in a middle class neighborhood. It's just, to me, when you look at it, is those people of color like myself, the laws are targeted on us, are targeted towards us, and it's hands down because there's no way, shape, and form that you would think you're gonna get a life sentence, for a small level person like myself.
Yeah. And like you said, no arranged buy, no bust. You're not found in your possession. It was just on testimony of others. And I think you know more than anybody that all these studies that come out that point the racial inadequacies of our federal sentencing guidelines and all this, but yet still they exist. And I know part of when you were in prison, you say you had high school education, but you started reading. And you started studying the law, and take me through what how it was to read law books while you're in prison.
So after I got my appeal denied, after I got my habeas corpus denied, I said to myself, the only person gonna get me out of here is myself, and I just started reading case laws and case laws and cases and cases, and some of it was beginning of the stage, it was foreign because they're utilizing words that we commonly don't use every day. So I got myself a Black Law dictionary, and I started looking up those words that I didn't know. And those words, and I was putting them together, like, wow, this word mean that. Never even thought that word mean that. And then I just kept looking at more and more, and I started understanding what the judges were saying, how they were saying it. I was reading the descendant, what the judges was opposing the the opinion of the court. You know, I was reading so cases that didn't even apply to me. You know, and the next thing you know, I just start understanding this is the law. And then I started reading other books that was wrote about, you know, the law that they didn't want you to know. And those books is really what broadened my horizon in reference to how the law really is. And I started also reading American jurisprudence, you know, how the law is intended, you know, and that put everything in its proper perspective.
Yeah, and that perspective is something that eventually led to you getting out and led to where you are today, helping others. We're going to take a quick little break, and we'll come back and talk all about that.
Okay.
You know what's fascinating is that a lot of people don't realize this, but you do not have to be in possession of drugs to be convicted of a drug offense.
Say more.
Yeah, the
What do you
conspiracy, because there's something called conspiracy.
Right.
And the agreement to commit a crime, two
Right.
people agree to commit a crime, that is a conspiracy.
Which is a separate crime.
And most people that are convicted of drug offenses are convicted under a conspiracy theory. And a lot of times those people are convicted with no drugs in their possession
Right.
at all. Their conviction is based on the testimony of others.
Right.
And so what the prosecution does is they'll parade a bunch of people, a bunch of witnesses to give testimony that's all consistent about somebody that has been dealing drugs or trafficking drugs. And that's enough, because all they have to do is prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And if you get enough witnesses against you, that's
Sure.
proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
Sure.
Yeah.
Regardless of the alleged character of the witnesses, when everybody's singing the same song, you kind of start believing it.
Yeah.
So whenever he says things or feels like that's not evidence, that is evidence, and it is not perfect evidence.
Yeah.
But a jury can weigh the testimony of people who've done a number of things, and a felony conviction surely doesn't mean you're a dishonest person per se. A jury can consider that. Go ahead.
But my problem with this case is the double life sentence.
Now that is not a measured
is
response.
a
It doesn't meet.
huge
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah,
Nobody
yeah.
that with a nonviolent, this is a nonviolent drug offense.
A nonviolent, no drug offense.
Double life sentence? That makes no sense.
No, that seems
whatsoever.
extreme. And when you look at the cost of that to those of us who finance that operation, it's offensive. I didn't get the correction you just cost me by having to pay for somebody to do that. And that person's freedom is worth more because they're important people in other people's lives. But you have to think about this, though. The prosecution decides what they're going to charge you with. They could charge you with a number of things. A lot of times, depending on what the policy that's set in that department, it may be to charge you with the highest thing possible that they think they can get a conviction on. And when they do that, there are mandatory sentencing guidelines, at least there were then, that tie the judge's hands. And so the judges just have to score you out. However you score, that's what you're doing. And that's why you got a lot of these nonsense sentencing rulings.
Well, we got to go to another break, but when we come back, we're going to hear the second part of Tony Jones's interview.
This is about Carrie. It says, "There's not enough space, nor could I find enough words to articulate my experience with Fasig Brooks. Working closely with Carrie and Brittany has literally changed my life. Not only did they handle my case as if they were standing up for their own immediate family, we became like family. I've never felt alone in the process. I never felt like just another case, and the encouragement on the harder days would always lift me up. Absolutely everyone in the firm exudes a compassion for the cases they handle and a real passion to empower the lives of individuals and families far beyond a settlement. They are strong, resilient, will leave no rock unturned. I absolutely love Fasig Brooks."
I love that. I mean, I just have no words to explain how grateful I am that somebody feels like that about us.
Welcome back to Come Back Stronger, where we are introducing you to Tony Jones. The second part of his interview is coming up. Mr. Jones was convicted to a double life sentence and then ultimately was released on clemency because he only had a minor drug charge. And what he has done is he has taken that challenge that he had to face, and he has used that as the fuel to motivate him to help others who are going through similar things. Can't wait for you to hear the second part of this story.
Mr. Jones, talk a little bit more about the Black's Law Dictionary and how important that was for you.
Yeah, so the Black Law Dictionary is the decoder, meaning that it decodes words, meaning that it's amazing that when you look at the definition of dictionary, it tell you the decoder, because these are words that are being utilized to talk over your head while you're in court. And once I seen that, I'm like, wow, look at this right here, decoder, meaning that everything has been spoken in codes. And you know, when the earlier new edition, the early edition, like the first edition, the second edition, actually give you, I mean, nothing but really good definition terms or those legal words. Now the new edition, like the 8th and 9th editions, they're really not good because they watered down the definition. But the Black Law Dictionary helped me out. I mean, I guarantee you, if you can say a word, I can spit it right out in reference to the Black Law Dictionary, because it became my best friend. That's what I use every day, because that's what I knew, that only the judges are going to acknowledge, the prosecutors are going to acknowledge, and the clerks are going to acknowledge. They're not acknowledge anything else but the Black Law on the terms, and you got to use a lot of these terms just like they use them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, otherwise they're going to just ignore it. I mean, like you said, it's a decoder. It's something, because you're at the language, when you're in trial and your lawyer saying, I got this, if you would have had that resource back then, you would have said, no, wait a minute, you don't got this. I see this here. But so all your work, your research, your studying led to where you are today. Tell me about 2016 and what President Obama did for you and how you got to that point.
So at the time when I had started a lawsuit because I knew that I should have been released prior before 2016. So I started a lawsuit, and President Obama came on TV one day. He said he called on all the attorneys in the country to come on board to start a clemency project, and this project was consist of helping those people that's incarcerated with drug offenses who have been incarcerated 10 years or better to get them services for free. And I remember one day I was standing in front of the TV, me and another person. He said, Tony, they doing this because of you, because of what you've been doing. He said these laws changed because of you, because of what you've been doing. And I knew he was saying that, but I just didn't want to say it myself. And I didn't even, at this point, when they came out with the project, I didn't even want to take the clemency project at first. I was like, no, I'm sticking to my lawsuit, because I know my lawsuit is sound, everything is correct. But they actually forced me to give me clemency because of what I learned, and I started teaching it to others. Because I was like, if I didn't take these necessary measures, I wouldn't even be out right now. You know, they wouldn't even came up with the clemency project. But they knew those laws was outdated. They knew that the people of color who are the majority in the federal prison system, they knew it was a time for change. And this young Black boy, Tony Jones, is the one who brought his attention. He's not going to stop until we release him. And I just kept on pushing the paperwork, pushing it. And next thing you know, they just say, kick him out, man. Give him clemency, get him out of here, man. You know? And because I stopped signing paperwork, I stopped signing documents in prison, because I know your signature is important. And I said, I'm not signing nothing here because I don't consent to any of this. And next thing you know, I got a letter from President Obama commuting my sentence in 2016.
That's amazing. I mean, basically the squeaky wheel, you got the oil. They realized they couldn't keep you in there, couldn't keep you quiet. But in all honesty, they've not kept you quiet even after you've been released. So you've gone on and you've written a book, Where's Your Son? But you're also working to help others who are in your situation. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind the book and what it's about.
Yeah, so Where's Your Son is like a subtitle. The actual book is called From 2 Life Sentences to Clemency. And what the book consists of is telling my story or sharing my story with those people that experience the criminal justice system. I'm showing them exactly how I did it, how I went in there, how my mindset was, how I strategized and said, listen, I don't care nothing about no TV. I'm gonna learn the law. Only person got my interest is me. And I learned the law, and next thing you know, I started submitting petitions and administrative paperwork, to the courts and so on and so forth. And they're acknowledging it, because what? I'm utilizing the Black Law Dictionary, everything making sense. I'm not asking for anything. I'm requesting it, and at the same time, it's their language. And they have to acknowledge it. And the next thing you know, is like, this guy ain't gonna stop because he know what he's doing, and yeah.
So what are you doing to help others now that were in your situation?
So since I've been home, I started working with a nonprofit organization. First, I started volunteering with them because I know how it feels to be directly affected by the criminal justice system. But when I came home, I started seeing the different things that were plaguing my community. at the time was high on suspension rate was the kids in the community was getting suspended on a regular basis. So I started volunteering with this nonprofit organization, speaking as school board, talking about other alternatives, than expelling a kid or suspending the kid. And I end up getting the school board to actually hire more guidance counselors to help address those issues instead of just suspending those issues. And that's when I very first started off. And then I also went to speak to the lieutenant governor of Virginia about criminal police reform in Virginia. And we got some things done on that end. And ever since then, I just kept on going, to different places, speaking about my experience, and then hoping that the person I'm talking to, the legislator I'm talking to, it would reach them. So therefore we can get things changed. And I've been an organizer now since almost 6 years. And I worked on a lot of that. I worked on criminal police reform. I worked on Medicaid expansion. When the coronavirus first hit, I had started a chapter where I live in Suffolk, and I got the people in my community, to actually go and protest in reference to, we didn't want the big pharmaceutical companies to get the lead on who can get a vaccination and how much it's going to cost. We didn't want that to happen because we knew if the big pharmaceutical companies get a lead on it, then they was going to overcharge people. They're going to do price gouging, and it was going to go sky high. And it went on the internet and it went viral and so on and so forth. But at the same time, this was way before they even came up with a vaccination. But we just wanted to do something like that because we just want to let people know. By me knowing, like, hey, if you don't do certain things, you got to do things. You can't just let things like this go and let the government decide things. You got to get out in front and then do things and let them know that you're aware of this. So therefore, they can say, hey, we can't do it. We got to do it the way they asked me to do it.
Yeah. Well, Tony, I want to thank you for being on. You're an amazing gentleman. You're somebody that the system basically tried to screw over, and you took care of yourself and you learned how to beat the system, but you didn't become bitter. You became enlightened, and you're using your knowledge to affect change. And that's what Come Back Stronger is all about. You're sitting there, you're making the world around you a better place. And I want to thank you for everything you're doing and just applaud you for what you're doing. Right as we close, where can people find your book if they're interested in reading more about you?
So the book is still in editing form. So the book should be finished within the summertime. It's called From Two Life Sentences to Clemency. And just say it'll be on Amazon. And like I said before, the summer is over. And it's a must read. I'm gonna highlight everything on how I got out of prison, and it's also gonna highlight the mindset on what a person mindset have to endure to get through a maze like that.
Tony Jones, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I love the fact that Tony Jones has a message.
Yeah.
The message is educate yourself.
Yes, it is.
I think one of his challenges was that he did not understand the law.
Nope.
He did not understand that he could be involved in a conspiracy theory that could ultimately lead to his a double life sentence.
Sure.
He had no clue that that was even a possibility for him.
No, and unfortunately, if you don't have the means to hire a private lawyer and you are relying on a public defender, they don't have, the resources and the time to sit down and explain to you at the granular level he decided to, learn on his own about what do all these words that they're using, what do those words actually mean?
Yeah.
What is conspiracy? Because in his mind, what he's thinking. There's no drugs. I didn't do anything.
Right.
These people just set me up, and I couldn't possibly get in trouble for this. So I bet you anything, he didn't take a plea. That was offered.
Oh, no, he didn't.
Because
he
in
went
his
to trial.
mind, he thought, no problem, whatever. And I bet he was offered one, and he said, no, I couldn't possibly have done anything wrong. What in the world? And that came from ignorance.
Yeah.
That came from ignorance.
And that's why he's so big on educating yourself, learning about the law. And I think it's fascinating how you can kind of tie that into his life after his release, where he's making sure, he's doing what he can to make sure that these children in school don't get expelled or suspended from school.
Oh, well, you look at, he's got the statistics. Once that happens, boy, they're going to be in that criminal justice system before you know it. And once they're in it, they're in it.
Because he knows that knowledge is power. And if the kids are in school, they're gaining knowledge, even though they don't feel like they're gaining knowledge. And that is a big deal. That is, he can see that that's where he had gone wrong. And then when he started educating himself and actually reading, that's when he became empowered. And that's when he was able to effectuate effectuate change for himself.
Yeah, and we're not, and he's not advocating that you read this book and you can represent yourself, but you can definitely have more meaningful conversations with the people who do. So
Yeah.
I can't wait to wrap up on this.
Yeah, so we're going to go to a commercial break, but there's a lot more to talk about, so stay tuned. You know what I love about reading client reviews and getting the letters from our clients is I love to see that our clients know that we walk our talk. To me, that's incredibly important.
I got a review from one of my clients. She says, I'm not just mashing stars on my phone. This law firm deserves all 5 stars and more. She couldn't walk. She was on a scooty chair because she had a fractured ankle. She couldn't work. She's a single mom. And she said, Kimmy, I need help and I need it now. And her case was not a clear liability case. It was a tough case. And I said, all right, I'm gonna do everything I possibly can for you.
Let's do this.
And within 3 months, we got it settled. I'd like to thank you from the bottom of my heart. If I could be in a commercial to tell my story, I would.
Oh, here she is.
She's in it now.
Welcome back to Come Back Stronger, where we just introduced you to Tony Jones, who was a fascinating guy. He had a double life sentence because of a minor drug offense, a non-violent drug offense.
Yeah.
And he actually ended up spending 20 years until a clemency program got him released, and he basically was an inspiration for this clemency program.
Yeah.
And that Barack Obama eventually put into place, and he released him. And now, after all is said and done, he's taken that lessons that he learned, having gone through 20 years in prison, and he's using that as fuel to help other people.
I don't like that because I think one of the things he probably experienced but wasn't educated about how it came to be, he probably experienced a world in which he did see a lot of people who looked like him being in the criminal justice system, incarcerated over drugs, or if they were both getting drug charges, he would see them get harsher sentences, poorer outcomes. But then when he got to prison, he learned why that is. And a lot of it has to do with the effects of policies that sound good to begin with. War on drugs, say no to drugs, that sounds good. But anything that simple is usually not. And so when you look at the effects of that and how it was implemented because of the biases and the mindsets that we've had by the people who make decisions, who have the power, you can see how it ended up affecting one member of the area of the population more so than others.
Oh yeah, there's absolutely no doubt about it. And it's a tragedy or a travesty because it's also affecting our young people.
Oh yeah, there's no path.
So we're talking about he was 23 years old, and then he got out of prison at 43 years old for a minor non-violent drug offense.
Wasted the best years of life.
What sort of justice is that? There's no justice. So anyway, but the fact that he has used that to now help other people and to effectuate change literally within the legislature with the governor. It's a great story. Thank you so much for joining
Truly
us
inspiring.
for Come Back Stronger. We're going to be back next week with another person that we're going to introduce you that has come back stronger.
See you then.